Welcome to the Gospel According to Star Trek podcast. I'm Kevin C. Neese.
And I'm Mike Poteet. You're listening to episode 68, our review of Star Trek Discovery's latest, Species 10C. We'll start off with some Star Trek trivia.
And then we'll find out who wins Star Trek trivia right after our main topic, discussing Star Trek Discovery Season 4, Episode 12, Species 10C. We're going to have a great conversation. Stay with us. Well, Mike, welcome back. I'm glad you're here.
It's good to be back. I certainly enjoyed listening to you and Scott review the last two Star Trek episodes. You had a great conversation, but it's nice to be back this week.
It's good to have you back, and I really enjoyed having Scott on. We'll have to do that more again in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
How are you doing? How are you doing since last episode, or since last we talked, as it were?
Since last episode, I'm doing great. Since last time we talked, I did something really cool that made me think of Star Trek, though.
Oh, yeah.
There's a local film institute near me that does a series of events called cinema seminars. It's hard to say that three times fast.
Yeah, right.
Where they take a movie and they bring in a professor of film studies from a local-ish college, and the professor gives a half-hour lecture before the movie, and then they screen the movie. Your ticket includes popcorn and a drink, and then at the end, the professor moderates a discussion among the audience about the movie. Nice. And so the professor can set it in context and talk about things to look for and so forth. So I would never have thought to see this movie on my own, but because a friend of mine and I wanted to do this seminar thing together, I went to see Dirty Harry on Wednesday night.
Really? Oh, wow.
The Clint Eastwood vigilante cop thriller. But do you know who plays the villain in that movie?
I don't.
He's credited as Andy Robinson. It's none other than Andrew Robinson, who plays Garrick on Deep Space Nine. And when he first showed up on the screen, I wasn't sure, I thought, but as soon as he started doing things that involved him getting wide-eyed, crazy faces, I thought, oh yeah, that's Andrew, that's Garrick. So if you're interested at all in seeing an early role for Andrew Robinson, and if Dirty Harry could even be in your bailiwick for that reason, I recommend it, because it's an intense performance he gives, and very compelling. And there are moments where you will think you can see that little Cardassian spoon in his forehead, because he's not that far removed from crazy Garrick at moments. So, in Empok Nor, when I'd never known. I'd never heard. Oh yeah, Andrew Robinson, most famous for, and I really know what he's most famous for. Maybe now it's Deep Space Nine, but Dirty Harry, of course, was a big success at the time, and very important in that genre of cop thriller movies, and just to see him give this performance so distant in some ways and close at some other moments from his work on Deep Space Nine was really, really fascinating. So it was an added bonus value for Trekkies in the audience.
That's pretty cool. You never know where you're going to make those Star Trek connections, Yeah,
I'm always fascinated when they show up, especially when I haven't gone looking for them,
Yes. That's always the fun part. That's the best one. You're like, oh my gosh, it's Marina Sirtis. What's she doing here? Yeah.
Right.
I love it. Well, that's cool. Well, that's a little bit of trivia we didn't know about Andy Robinson. I didn't know, and you didn't know before finding out.
Me neither, no.
But speaking of trivia, maybe we should continue that theme and have a little trivia of our own.
Oh, look at this. Question 1. Who plays the villain in Dirty? No. All right. 3 trivia questions unseen by either of us.
Yes.
Number 1. Who commands the USS Enterprise C in the Next Generation episode Yesterday's Enterprise? Now, I have an answer, but I can already think of multiple quibbles we could make with this question, but I'm going to commit myself to an answer here.
Okay. I'm going to give my best answer, which isn't going to be good. All right. Okay. Ready.
All right. Number 2. How does Mr. Spock contact the USS Enterprise in the original series episode, The Galileo 7, when his shuttle loses communication?
Oh, yeah. Okay. I remember the effect, but I'm not sure I remember the technology exactly.
Well, you can describe it in a way that, we both agree when we see the answer that, yeah, you're talking about the same thing, then you'll get credit.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Now,
Got it.
this third question, remember, these cards were published after Enterprise. And
Right.
so none of the newest series were in existence at the time.
Right.
So
right.
the third question is, who was the youngest regular cast member on any Star Trek series?
Oh. Okay.
All right. So you got your answer?
Yeah.
All right. So we'll find out shortly. The tale of the tape, as they say.
The tail.
They probably don't say that about trivia too much.
This would be like the tale of the text.
The tale of the text. That's right. That's right.
Okay.
The course of
all
the
right.
chat.
Yeah. Right. All right. So we have our answers ready, and we will locked in. And we will get back to that at the end of the episode. And now it is time to discuss Star Trek Discovery Season 4, Episode 12, ominously titled Species 10C. How did you find this, sir?
I thought it was great. I think this is the finest first contact story Star Trek has given us in 55 years. I really, really enjoyed it. Now, it did remind me in a lot of ways. Have you seen the movie Arrival?
I haven't, but I kind of get the idea a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's about trying to make contact and communicate with a advanced alien species radically unlike us.
Mm-hmm.
They're large. We only kind of ever see them, in bits and pieces, and lots of times it's Amy Adams and the team of scientists standing in front of them, separated by a glass partition, and the aliens are kind of swirling in the fog, and their language is this intricate blend of mathematics and music. And so they're stylistically and thematically, there were lots of places where this episode reminded me of Arrival. But Arrival is a great movie and takes its cue in terms of wanting to establish peaceful contact and communication with the unknown. That's very much of the Star Trek ethos and has been ever since Star Trek started. Right. So it didn't bother me. I didn't say, oh, they're just redoing Arrival. Instead, I thought, well, this just goes to show that now that Star Trek has the resources to really, we've seen first contact with strange species before, but what you can do in the 1960s or even the 1980s and 90s versus what you can do now.
Yes.
It's just so different. And I loved the deliberation with which, I've complained sometimes this season about the deliberation with which things happen on Discovery. Like, come on, get with it already. But this time it felt really, really warranted. This idea, which having to establish communication with an alien species from scratch. And I appreciated that the universal translator was off the table as an option. I appreciated that they made efforts to dramatize how that would go down. How would you start from scratch and getting into the, sending mathematical equations back and forth in a bridge language. As realistic as first contact with an alien species can seem in entertainment, this seemed realistic. This seemed like it has the elements of Contact, the movie Contact, in that way as well.
Yes,
communication based on mathematical equations.
I thought of that. I actually had that Contact reference in my head. Math is the only universal language.
yeah. So I really, for all that it did remind me of other things, I was not annoyed by it or upset by it, and didn't think it diminished Species 10C, the episode, in any way. I thought this was just an outstanding first contact story. And what do you think?
Oh, I felt the same way. I thought it was beautiful. I don't know that I had assessed it against, Star Trek's history of first contact episodes, or first contact occurrences. I guess there might be. I guess there are some of the movies like with V'ger and things like that.
It really had a strong V'ger vibe too.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And that's really actually the whole process of getting over to the 10C and getting deeper and deeper into the 10C's bubble does, mirror that journey into V'ger in the
Yeah.
motion picture. And I really think beautifully, beautifully done. And not, sometimes we can talk about a challenge in Star Trek and then it's kind of too easy.
Exactly.
But
Yeah.
in this, I really felt that everything was done logically and that it all made sense and it flowed without feeling rushed and
Yeah.
without feeling slow either.
Yeah, I agree. It was just perfectly paced. The incremental nature of it.
Mm-hmm. And, the way it all came together, it was so funny because we have these moments in Star Trek where it's just like where we perceive a threat where there isn't one, and we really started out there in this episode when the creature from the abyss came and
Yeah.
ran, swallowed up
Another movie
Discovery.
reference.
Another movie reference, yeah. But when they came and swallowed up Discovery and pulled them in, and everybody's freaking out, I was
Yeah.
like, hey, wait a minute. Don't you get it? This is what you want. You want to get inside. You want access.
Yeah.
Why assume that this is, some aggressive action,
Right.
So it was, in fact, I wrote down, because Burnham was saying, have Stamets, figure out how to get us out of this. And I said, no, you don't want to be out. You want to be in,
Yeah.
get
No,
in.
that's a good point. That's a good point.
So, but apart from that, still, which, I mean, still it's understandable, that they're freaking out at something they don't understand or don't know yet what's going on, that they're on heightened alert.
And it's interesting to see different characters' levels of tolerance for that.
Mm-hmm.
President Rulick seems a little on edge. And I'm not saying it's wrong.
No.
I'm sure I'd see him a lot more on edge than President Rulick did. But there's that one scene in the conference room scene when General Ndoye tells Burnham, a good commander knows when they've hit the wall and have to exercise more drastic options. I'm paraphrasing, but
right.
But Burnham tells her, yeah, I used to think there was no wall. And in my experience as captain, I found out that's wrong, but I know we haven't hit the wall yet. She's still
right.
Holding open that possibility of peaceful first contact and is vindicated. It's borne out. And I just thought, wow, we have this episode made me think again how much we've seen Michael grow as a character. Especially there was one line where she talks about, species 10C has come to say hello. And I couldn't help but think of the Vulcan hello, the very first episode of the whole series, where Burnham was the one advocating strike first, be defensive, be on your guard. And she makes this catastrophic decision, which is understandable, but absolutely the wrong thing to do. And yet here we have, I wonder if even in the way Sonequa Martin Green delivered that line, if she was playing that subtext of, a alien species saying hello, how would that resonate for her at so many levels? So I thought that was just such a rich moment. And it again made me think, wow, we've really seen this character come such a long way and so beautifully done, beautifully written and portrayed.
It is interesting, though, that you see the same sort of motivation in her character, because in that moment where she's trying to do the Vulcan hello thing, she's still like following this sense that we have to do this the right way. We have to be able to communicate in the right way, even if the right way is not our normal way.
Right.
So there is that's still going on with her, but she's seasoned and has learned a lot since then.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And is less arrogant than she was back then. And
for sure.
I really appreciate that. I love you connecting that back to that, because I hadn't even thought about that. And I love that moment too. I thought of you in that moment when she said to Ndoye, I used to think there was no wall. As captain, my experience has taught me otherwise. General, we haven't hit it yet.
Right.
And then there's a little shared look between her and Rilick. And I thought of your, your constant theme, throughout this season of when is that no-win scenario thing going to pay off? And I mean, I'm not saying this is the payoff, but I felt like that was a link back to it.
For sure.
And
it was acknowledging their
mm-hmm.
history with this issue.
Yeah, and an
we
agreement
got one episode
them.
left where she could still come up against something that's too much, but
we shall see. We shall really see. Because gosh, I forget we only have one episode left. Oh man, oh that hurts me. I'm ready for like 3 more. But oh well. What else did you like about this episode?
I loved the use of Jett Reno made in this episode.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. And it was interesting. It was, I appreciated Scott bringing the perspective last week that maybe her first appearance this season was filmed under COVID protocols, that she wasn't actually sharing a soundstage with other actors. That hadn't occurred to me. But looking back, that makes all the sense in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And that maybe that's why her performance on that episode just didn't really seem like Reno. This episode was, clearly they were all on the soundstage together, but another very different turn as Reno, much less of the humor and the banter and the witty repartee. And some of that's just the situation, but also this is an episode where, boy, this woman is just sharp. Yes. She is so self-possessed of her wits that she's observing carefully everything going on, so she can see that Tarka's equations are flawed. She knows what's going to happen if he does this, and that she has the presence of mind to ask for black licorice of all things, because it has an acid that's going to enable her to fiddle with her debauchee. I forget what the teching the tech was, but to do this thing where she can get a message out to Discovery, and of course the revelation, I think, of some backstory to her that we didn't have before, about how when she crashed with this young ensign and he was going to die, but she just kept refusing to let him die, basically because she didn't realize it until he died, that his eyes reminded her of her wife's eyes. And so she was hanging on, and, her telling this story as a concrete illustration of how pain makes us blind, makes us do the wrong thing, confuses us. And just the way, so it was an artfully constructed script for her to deliver, but also the way she did it was just so, it wasn't over the top, it wasn't mawkish, it wasn't, violins playing in the background. It was just very kind of matter of fact that, and gosh, I just, I've always enjoyed Reno, but my respect for her as a character just went up so much. Not that it was low to begin with, you understand. Just they've added a new layer to her I didn't expect them to add in the penultimate episode of the season. Right. And I really enjoyed that.
Well, it was beautiful, and Tig is just somebody who just I just enjoy her. I've seen her. I haven't seen like her other like work exactly.
Yeah, I've not seen her anything else.
I've seen her do stand up, and I've seen her on like late night talk shows and stuff, interviews with her. And I have just always, she's just one of those people. She walks in the room and she is instantly fascinating. And she's very much like Reno in real life. So intelligent, so dry, so direct. And the humor is delivered with like the same directness as the sincerity, but it's impossible to not tell the difference. And that's just her. And I love that about her being the character who's on Book's ship, because she's perfect for this moment, because she always has a certain objectivity and a certain distance from things, but with an underlying emotional connection and a knowledge. And really, Kovich reminds me of her in this way, that seeming a little emotionally distant or a little aloof, but at the same time, there's a perceptiveness behind that. And there's a directness, there's an efficiency of communication, a dryness, and a sincerity that, no matter what she's doing, no matter what she's saying, she's not unintentional about it. And she's not leading you down a merry path. She's not going to talk around things, because she jokes so much, because she has this biting humor. When she is sincere and direct and serious, you know that she absolutely means it and she's getting right to the heart of it. And that made her the perfect person to get to book. And you would think maybe Michael would be, but it was Reno, and I think she was wonderful this episode. And we've seen her proclivity for black licorice before, and so this
have
episode,
we? I didn't remember that.
Yes, we have, and so this episode I felt like gave a little backstory to that, where it's like she's not just enjoying black licorice, which she does, she's also got it there in case she needs it. Because it has engineering
prepared,
it has an engineering use as well. So I thought that was beautiful, and Reno was just glorious in this episode. Everybody was so great. I mean, this was
forgiven for not having her around more this season.
agreed This is what we've needed, and I'm so excited about it and so glad for that. It's wonderful. And that brings us, I think, a little bit to Book's arc and Book's story in this episode, which I really enjoyed. Of course, David Ajala is always fabulous, but I don't know. There were so many textures to his performance in this episode. So much. His ability to convey complex layers of emotion at once is just breathtaking. He is just one of my favorite people to watch in Star Trek. Which makes him just one of my favorite people to watch. But he just has such beautiful depth and nuance. And to learn a bit about the name Cleveland Booker.
Oh, yes, that was fascinating.
Oh, and I love how she calls him Book 5 later.
Book the 5th.
Oh, Book the 5th. Book the 5th. That's right. I loved that. But I thought it was beautiful what he said about the fact that the name Cleveland Booker carried this trust with it, which of course had been established by the original Cleveland Booker, but then had been passed on, and here he was, the 5th recipient of the name. That idea of trust earned and carried through a name, I really connected with, because as people of Jesus, right, as people of Christ, I think, I think of globally and historically how often we have done such a poor job of carrying and continuing to earn the trust of the name Christ. Yet we are still entrusted with it. Yet we still carry it. And to carry it now in a season in which we are so aware of how abused that name is and what a bad reputation so many of us have given it, that there are many people who would otherwise call themselves Christians who don't, because the name Christian is considered so toxic. People of, churches of certain denominations take their denominational name off their signs and off their websites.
Yeah.
Because their denominational name has become so toxic.
Yeah.
And being in a situation like that, I think ought to give us all pause about how we carry that name in a way that helps reestablish trust, not in the institutions that nominally associate themselves, literally nominally, by name, associate themselves with Christ, right? That bear that name necessarily, but looking for something that bears the name in the identity. We say, in the name of Christ we pray, which is a Christian invention. It isn't established necessarily in the scriptures or whatever, but the idea of praying in that name is the idea of praying in accordance with that identity, in hope of aligning ourselves with the purpose and the calling and the meaning of Christ. And I hope that, as so many people want to shun the name Christian, I have thought about that myself at various times in the past 20 years. But I've held on to it because if I can just have a moment to say to people, not that kind of Christian, someone who actually follows Jesus, someone who actually is thinking about Christ, because people still do respect Christ. People still do respect Jesus. Gene Roddenberry respected Jesus,
right?
A great deal. And And so being able to, I think we're in a unique position to be able to sort of rescue the reputation of Christ's name, and that is the importance of living honest, forthright, principled, convivial, and loving lives here and now, to try in some small way to repair some of that damage. So I really appreciate it. I'm sorry, that's a big again, like I said last week, it's a big a big thing out of a small moment. But
no.
I really dialed in on that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to focus in on there. The thing that struck me most about the scenes of Book and Tarka this week was how apparent it is that it's an abusive relationship.
Yes. Oh, good.
And I had not really. I mean, I think it's been there all along, but I hadn't seen it.
Yes.
And I, I will say I have no firsthand experience of being in that kind of relationship, but I know so many people do, and so many people are, and I know it's very painful and difficult. But I think sometimes it's not always apparent to the person who's being abused.
Right.
And I wonder if the writers, I mean, the way that Reno talked to Book when they had their one-on-one sidebar,
Yeah.
And she's telling him, you've got to make this right. And she says other things in that conversation that I think she's encouraging Book to see their relationship, Book's and Tarka's relationship, for what it is,
mm-hmm.
and to get out, to put it right. And that's often very hard for people to do, of course, for a variety of reasons. But
right.
Anyway, that's just what struck me about the reframing of that relationship. It made me feel less sympathetic to Tarka. Kind of some of that sympathy that had built up for me over the last few episodes ebbed, didn't go away completely. People are complex in stories as well as in real life. Mm-hmm. But he did lie to Book again. This is what, the third time maybe that he's told. It's certainly the second time he's acted unilaterally against species 10C. Mm-hmm. He acknowledges his calculations are wrong, but he says, but it might happen, it might not happen, and they'll still have an hour to evacuate Earth or whatever.
Right.
He's making excuses because he's so focused on getting his revenge. It seems at this point more mm-hmm. than where's the talk of, I've got to get to my partner in the promised land. Right. There's none of that. I mean, it's still there, I think, but he's so focused on, as Lily tells Picard and for contact, they hurt you, so you're going to hurt them. I don't think it's too much along the spectrum from where Picard was in that movie. And if this series of Discovery were to go on much longer, we might see Tarka become more and more like Ahab, the way Picard did.
Right.
Anyway, so that was just, I thought, an interesting and a bold framing of that relationship that I expect many viewers can relate to at a very painful and personal level. But again, that just shows how Discovery brings up these issues and isn't afraid to engage with them directly, maybe a little more indirectly in this case, but doesn't shy away from those painful parts of relationships, as well as the joy relationships can bring us. Like that scene with Saru and Michael doing primal scream therapy together.
Yes.
That was a really nice moment that was kind of goofy, but it felt right.
Yeah, it was really good. I want to get back to that, but I'd like to stay with Tarka for just a minute because I think you're so right to pull that out, that it's an abusive relationship, and I hadn't thought about it until you said it. And agreed. The sympathy for Tarka kind of goes down a great deal in this episode, even though you can see that he's kind of reasoning that they'll probably be okay. Well, he's telling himself
he's
that.
Rationalizing.
He's rationalizing.
He's not reasoning. He's rationalizing.
That's a good
he's
distinction.
Making excuses for doing what he wants to do.
Yes, I agree. That's a good distinction to make. And so as you describe it in that manner, I want to say that something I notice about it when Book has been, beaten down, and Tarka's dragged him over into the containment area, he says, "I've only had 2 real friends in my life,
Mm-hmm.
and you're one of them." I believe him when he says that. I think that's absolutely true. And I think that Tarka, I don't think he recognizes the abuse that he's inflicting on Book.
I buy that. I don't think
and
he would. Yeah.
Yeah, and I point
Just,
that
I
out.
mean, it's not there, but I think you're right.
Right, and I point that out specifically because I think there are a lot of times that, like you said, Book doesn't realize the relationship is abusive, but I think there are a lot of times in which the abusive person in a relationship doesn't realize that the relationship is abusive. And that is one of the things that can make it very hard to realize and to admit to yourself that you're in an abusive relationship, because you don't see in the other person the kind of direct malice that you associate generally with the concept of abuse.
Right.
That abuse can be an outgrowth even of good intention, but good intention in someone who is undisciplined in their own manner or in their own perception of themselves, or in their own perception of a relationship, or their ability to take responsibility for their own actions, whatever it is, they have a flaw within themselves. It might be that they are malicious toward you, but it might not be that they're malicious toward you. And that even without malice, a person can still be abusive. Even without malice, that person who is being abusive can be dangerous enough that you need to get away from them because you can't fix them. And one of the most toxic things that happens in an abusive relationship is that the abused person feels that they have the capacity to change the abusive person so that they are no longer abusive. And a lot of that can sometimes be rooted in the fact that the abusive person doesn't recognize their own abusive behaviors. They believe the best about themselves, and so we believe the best about them. And so I just want to pull that out to say to anybody who might be wondering what kind of relational dynamic you're in, just remember that abuse doesn't always look the way people think it would, even to the person committing the abuse. And that is an important thing to remember.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's true. I think that's true in our church relationships too. I think it's, a lot of people are victims of institutional abuse. Again, one of those things that causes the trust in the name Christ to be so damaged is institutional abuse. And a lot of people who are committing institutional abuse, I think especially in the church environment, again, are rationalizing and don't perceive what they're doing as the abuse that it is. And that's one of the reasons it continues to perpetuate. And that's one of the reasons it can be hard to point it out and to hold people accountable, because they seem so wonderful and they say so many right and so many good things, and you have so many warm feelings toward them for so many reasons, but the abuse is still there, and you must deal with it in however is appropriate for the situation. So anyway, that's all I have to say about that.
Said. Yeah.
Okay, moving on to next thing. Just from a nerd technical perspective, you talked to me once about I was talking to you about editing the show,
Yeah.
and you said, "No, don't tell me how the sausage is made." I don't want the secrets revealed to me. And I am feeling that way this season with the AR wall. Because I feel like every time we get to a scene, like in the shuttle bay, particularly because of the layout and the design of the shuttle bay, I always get this feeling of the AR wall screen behind everybody. And I'm always trying to think of where the line is and all that. And I'm like, I wish I didn't know the AR wall existed, so I could just be immersed in these environments and not pull myself out of the show like that. I don't know if you've had that experience.
I was so absorbed in the moment, I wasn't even thinking about that.
I had that last episode.
I remember you and Scott mentioned the AR wall. I honestly haven't thought about it all season.
Well, I hope I didn't spoil it for you. But
No.
But But that's just
I
but
was distracted by the fact that in the shuttle bay, the Federation is still using hexagonal storage crates, apparently.
are they really? I didn't notice.
Wasn't there some joke about that in lower decks about why, if
Yes.
you want these stacked, why did you give them 6 sides?
8 sides, I think it is. I think they're octagonal, aren't they?
Oh, maybe they.
Or are they hexagonal? I think
Maybe.
they're
Anyway,
octagonal.
they look
Anyway,
like
whatever.
the ones in TNG. They have the same. They're the same impractical shape.
Yes, that was wonderful. They kept tumbling down, and it's just like, why? I want they stay. Yep. But coming back to that primal scream that you were talking about, I'm reminded of a piece that was done that's on the internet. I don't know what it's from. I think it's from a version of the Carol Burnett show, and it's Carol Burnett and Robin Williams doing a scene called "The Funeral." And if you haven't seen it, go look it up. It's amazing.
I'll have to.
But there's this bit in that scene that was written into the scene. They do 2 versions of it. One that's as written and one that has Robin riffing to no end.
I bet that's wonderful.
it's brilliant in both takes. But the thing about that scene is they talk about keening, which is this, the idea of the sort of guttural, not guttural, but this idea of the sort of evocative, emotional vocalizations, right? And they demonstrate within the scene that it sounds ridiculous, but it actually helps. It actually works. And I thought of that in this scene between Saru and Burnham, where they're screaming at each other. And it's interesting that it's Tarka again. This character who's being even further vilified in a lot of ways in this episode. He's given something beneficial.
He made a contribution of value to Saru.
Yeah. But I thought that was a great moment. I love seeing that from Saru, and I love the way he apologized after he got done with it. It was beautiful.
Yes, they both played it very well.
Yes.
It was a good moment.
Yeah. And it's great to see characters having those moments of processing and of laughing at themselves, and very human, very, very seemingly unrehearsed responses.
Yeah, and very Star Trek, right? It's a little bit like McCoy and Kirk during all the action and Balance of Terror. Kirk has this moment where he's alone with McCoy and confides to him that, what if I'm wrong? They're all looking to me to make the decision. What if I make the wrong decision? And McCoy gives that little speech about, all that universe and maybe more. There's only one of each of us, only one named Jim Kirk, don't destroy the one named Kirk.
Yeah.
So it's not quite that, because they don't end in having a primal scream session, but it's the same. It's the same kind of, the commander showing vulnerability to a trusted colleague and friend.
Yeah.
I think it's so nice that Burnham acknowledges to Saru, there's no one I'd rather be, walking through this door with than you.
Yes.
And again, calling back to the Vulcan hello and all they've been through since then, of course, too. Saru was captain of Discovery for a while. All they've been through, all that relationship has remained. And
yes,
I just really thought that was a nice. They would not have had to have acknowledged that in that moment, but I thought it was great that they did.
I thought it was too. It was really beautiful that they keep coming back to that core of the relationships that these people have with one another, and with the two of them, that trust is there and is so deep between them because of everything they've been through and everything their relationship has survived. Is so beautiful. And I like what you say too about Michael's vulnerability with Saru. I was thinking in that moment of when Book asked Ndoye, how's Michael doing? And she says, scared, same as the rest of us. She just hides it. She just hides it better.
Right, right.
Which I thought was really, again, it shows Ndoye is a compassionate person, is a human being, cares about the people that she's with, even if she disagrees with them, or at times disagrees with them, or has another motivation. It really is great, because I think the fact that Earth is isolationist in this period is a really easy way to kind of vilify Earth and humans on Earth. And Ndoye gives them a heart and gives them humanity. And I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I've never felt ill will towards Ndoye. I think they've done a good job of giving her motivation for what she does. And, last week when she was listening to Book's plan, she said, okay, but it's only a last resort. And even this week, when she carries it out, I didn't agree with it, but I've got more information than she does at that point, right? All the viewers do. So it's easy to understand why she's doing what she's doing. And it's not the right thing to do. It's not the right choice, but it's a choice that's understandable.
Yes.
And no, I've never felt like she's the villain of the piece, or even that isolationist Earth is. It's unfortunate, but it's understandable.
Right. And I really appreciate that about this season, that there are people who hold to ideas and hold to ways of thinking that are kind of antithetical to what we normally expect in Starfleet, what we normally expect of in the Federation, and yet we give them humanity and we give them respect, even if we ultimately say, yeah, what you're doing is wrong. I really appreciate that. And I thought with her too, it bothered me in that scene where Michael says to her, General, we haven't hit that wall yet. I wrote down, the impatience is stunning, because we just got started and we have 12 hours or whatever we have, which isn't a long time, but we've only been at this for maybe 40 minutes or something like that. And yes, it could drag on for a long time, but your plan won't take that long to implement. You can wait. I felt like everybody, Book, Tarka obviously is the most impatient out of all of them, but even Ndoye, I thought I almost couldn't accept that she was that impatient.
It almost pulled you out of it sounds like.
Not pulled me out of it so much, but just like, come on, what are you thinking?
Well,
just calm down
doesn't she have a line about, doesn't she tell, when she's relaying the situation back to Tarka, she says, we have to find a way to talk to them from scratch, which is an incredibly time-consuming proposition or something. Right. I mean, I don't think, she's not wrong about the time-consuming part, and the stakes are really high. And again, it's easy as the viewers who have all the pieces to know, but
true.
That didn't bother me. I get your point. I accept it. And obviously it's a valid reaction. But I just didn't share it. I felt like the writers have done a really good job of setting up a situation where some characters are going to feel we really have to see this through, and others are going to say there's just no time. We're out of time. We are out of time. And there's just no time. Sometimes that's a hard argument to rebut.
Yes, that's very true.
That would be great, but we don't have time.
Right. And sometimes we have more time than we think we do.
That's true too.
You never know.
Yeah.
Another thing that I enjoyed about this episode was, again, the way we bring those sort of second tier characters in to the mix. And the idea, and this is hard for a lot of us creatives to understand and to really grasp onto in our lives, and this may sound familiar to you, just having worked with me as long as you have, that it's hard to remember that bringing more people into something can make it better. And especially when it's something that, I don't know, maybe has our name on it, that is maybe our brand and our public identity, that maybe we get a little possessive and a little bit wanting to do every single thing ourselves. That might sound a little familiar to you, but that bringing in more people helps. And I love that Reese and Nilsson and Detmer were beamed in, and that Michael brought them in to consult, and they all brought something to the conversation that helped move things forward. I really like that. Yeah,
I really liked that scene. It reminded me in some ways of Picard consulting with his bridge officers before doing things, bringing them into the conference room for discussion options, So it's nice to see Star Trek continuing that model of command. And I think it's in some ways even more so with Burnham, that I don't know. I feel like she's maybe even a little more. I think Picard was always genuine, but I feel like with her, she's even more urgently open to new ideas and new perspectives, maybe because she's so cognizant of her limited perspective earlier in the show, back in season one,
Yes.
right? When she was on the Shinzo.
I think so too.
Maybe that continues to inform her command style, which again, I think they run the risk if they're not careful of just making Burnham out to be the best captain ever, by gosh. That's why a little part of me is still going to harp on, is it next week? The Kobayashi Maru scenario is really going to hit. There's no good way out. And,
right.
We bring Burnham against that wall. I don't know. I don't know what they'll do. And of course, I'm not really wishing bad things on the character who doesn't really exist. So, I think that they've built her up, as we talked earlier about, she's grown so much. Are we going to end the season with that kind of feel good about her place, or is the season going to end with another big challenge that she has to grow back from next season? I don't know. It'll be interesting to see.
I
could see them going both ways.
Like a season cliffhanger. Oh dear.
Not even a cliffhanger. Just she has to make some devastating choice next week that gets book killed or kills species 10C. I don't know what, but something really big that is not going to be resolved with a chat with Dr. Kolber or a talk with Saru, or even another primal scream of Saru. Just something where she had to make the choice, and it could even be the right choice. Like, I could envision a scenario where she makes some devastating choice, capital D, capital C, and every single character agrees you did the right thing, you made the tough choice, and it's still just so gutting that she resigns or takes a leave of absence or whatever. And that's where we pick up season 5. I could see them doing that, or maybe not. I'm just speculating. I don't have any insight.
Who knows?
But they've set up Burnham to be such a great captain. She reminds me of Kirk in lots of ways all the time. I just wonder if they're going to leave her at the end of the season intact as awesome Starfleet captain. And part of me hopes they do, but part of me also hopes and thinks it could be fuel for even further growth with this fascinating character if she has to really hit a wall next week and come back from that. Who knows?
We shall see.
They didn't ask me when they were writing the season, so
right. Well, and something that I really like what you're saying about Michael leaning on other people, in part because she has that perception of her own headstrong nature, which we saw, that's how we were introduced to her, was through that aspect of her personality, that very direct, black and white way of viewing things. And I think she's learned a lot of shades of gray, and she's learned a lot of personal restraint. And, we even talked previously on the show about God restraining God's self. While God has, this infinite capacity, God is restrained, and that is an act of love and of mercy and of wisdom. And so seeing that is always, I think, a mark of maturity and a mark of growth in a character. But one of the things that was said in that little meeting there in the shuttle bay that I really liked was what Lieutenant Christopher said. If a problem stumps you, examine your assumptions, which I thought was really good, because our assumptions, our presuppositions, those things that inform the way we view the world or the way we view a particular issue, a particular problem, are often those things that we don't actually question. Yeah. And that's what worldview formation is all about. Is about asking questions about the questions we don't ask, about our assumptions and presuppositions, and whether those are a good foundation, and whether they are a help or a hindrance. And so I really liked that in this episode, the idea of questioning assumptions and examining them and seeing if there's something that we're assuming that isn't being helpful right now. Because we always function on the basis of assumptions and presuppositions. We always have those, and that's how we think. So, we can't get around them being there, but we can examine them and see whether they're helpful or not. And I think that really helped unlock things in this episode.
Yeah.
It reminded me even of what Reno said, which you had referenced earlier in this episode. Pain makes people blind.
Mm.
You know, there are assumptions and presuppositions that inform our actions when we're acting out of pain and out of hurt, and being able to shift that perspective. That's what's so strong. We're back to Reno again. What's so strong about Reno's work with Book in this episode is
it's really just brilliant.
Getting him to untangle that is really important. So
yeah.
Well, anyway, this has been a fabulous episode. I think this is it the strongest episode of season 4?
It's very close to it if it's not. I mean, it's quite good. It's quite good. I think a lot of it feels like a two-parter, because of the way it ends. And so we'll see how it sticks the landing or not. But it certainly shows that they know how to construct highly dramatic, high value, important, significant situations that have lots of layers of meaning as well. So it's just Discovery doing what Discovery does so well. And I think overall the season's been a little uneven. And as Scott pointed out last week, some of that's probably due to COVID protocols, and I hadn't really thought about that. But the last couple of weeks, I felt it's really they're coming toward the finish line really strong. So I hope that continues next week.
I agree. I'm looking forward to next week, even though it's the end of the season, which kind of makes me sad. It's still good, and we have great more Star Trek coming, which we will be talking about in our next episode.
We do indeed.
But before we get to that, I think it's time to see how we did on Star Trek trivia.
Oh, let's check it out.
Okay, so let's get ready to lock in our answers here. Ready to hit send in 3, 2, 1.
Okay.
All
right.
right.
So the answers to Star Trek trivia. Number 1 was who commands the USS Enterprise C in the Next Generation episode Yesterday's Enterprise? Yes. The answer is Captain Rachel Garrett.
Oh, right. I couldn't remember her name. And I also couldn't remember. I think I might be confusing episodes with my answer.
You said Kelsey Grammer. Yeah, you're thinking of Cause and Effect? Is that where the Bozeman comes through the temporal rift?
Yes, I don't know if it's Cause and Effect, but he is the captain of the Bozeman. Yeah,
he is indeed. Captain Fraser Crane is listening.
I remember the captain of the Enterprise C from that episode, but then for some reason I always tack the end of the Kelsey Grammer episode onto that episode in my mind. So
really?
I was like, so I was like, since I couldn't remember the other character's name at all, I thought, well, I know Kelsey Grammer's name, even if I don't remember his captain name. So I just put it in there. But it's not even the same episode. I don't know why I do that. It's something I can't get out of my head. So,
the reason I said there were quibbles to be had with that question is Rachel Garrett dies at the end of Act 3, I think, and then Lieutenant Castillo takes command of the Enterprise C. So
that's right.
I don't know, but anyway, Captain Rachel Garrett was what they were looking for.
Yeah, that's right.
Question number 2: how does Mr. Spock contact the Enterprise in the Galileo 7 when the shuttle loses communication? The answer is he dumps the shuttle's fuel and then ignites it.
Yes.
And you said venting plasma and igniting it as a signal flare, which I think that's close enough for full credit. And I said jettisons and ignites the shuttle's fuel as a flare, which I think that's. Yep. I think we both got that one.
Yep. I agree.
And number 3. I'm sorry to report we both wiped out on number 3. Who was the youngest regular cast member on any Star Trek series? You said Will Wheaton.
Yes.
I said Will Wheaton.
Yes.
The answer is Cirroc Lofton. He was 14 when Deep Space Nine premiered.
Was he really?
Now, how old was Will Wheaton when TNG premiered? I guess older than 14. Must have been
like 15 or something. I thought he was younger than that.
Well, so there you go.
Wow.
Learn something new every day.
And of course, I always think of Cirroc. I forget how young he was when the series started because he matured so much during that series.
It's true, but if you go back and watch Emissary, he does look
he's a kid.
Like a baby compared to even
12.
Wesley Crusher and TNG's 15.
And I always think of Will Wheaton. I always think of Wesley Crusher as being like, well, he's probably like 13 or something. Or supposed to be, I guess, in the series. And that's what I always think of. So gosh, wow, I forget Cirroc was that young. Oh, well. Well, so I think you have won.
I had
two
two
to my
of the three
one.
correct, and you had one of the three correct. So I guess I get the self-sealing steamboat, the golden self-sealing.
Yes,
steamboat.
don't forget that it's golden. That's important. Congratulations.
Well, thank you. I will cherish it as a thing of beauty and a joy forever.
Good. I'm so glad. Oh, wonderful. Well, this has been a very enlightening episode, and I've enjoyed it very much. In fact, I've enjoyed it so much that I think I'd like to do another episode with you, Mike. And when we do that other episode, what do you think we ought to talk about?
Well, I think we could talk about many things, but we should probably talk about season 2, episode 2 of Star Trek Picard, which is called Penance.
I think that's a good idea. I concur. Let's make it official.
How appropriate for the Lenten season that we'll be discussing an episode entitled Penance.
Oh, we're gonna get all into that next episode. Let's not start it now.
All right,
folks. I'm really looking forward to that, and folks, I hope you will join us for that. In the meantime, please like, comment, and share. And if you like what you're hearing, please write a review on iTunes or wherever you're listening, because your reviews help more people find out about our show and let us know how we're doing.
Also, send us your feedback and your questions. You can find us at Gospel Trek Pod on Twitter and Instagram, and The Gospel According to Star Trek on Facebook, or send us an email, gospeltrekpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to feature your feedback on the show.
And you can now support the show by subscribing. You'll get early access to each week's topical episode and outtakes and bonus content as well. So just click the subscribe button wherever you listen. And that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the Gospel According to Star Trek podcast. Thank you so much for being here. And until next time,
I'm Mike Poteet.
And I'm Kevin Sinise. And as Jesus said in John 10:10, live long and prosper. See you next time.